All right, everybody calm down, take a seat. We got to talk about how we may have just dug ourselves into a hole. Look, everybody says the SEC is the toughest conference in college football. But what if the SEC just became too tough for its own good? What if the league that has dominated college football for the last 2 decades just created a system where its own teams are going to beat each other out of the playoffs? Because starting in 2026, the SEC goes to a 9-game conference schedule. And on the surface, man, that sounds incredible. More big games, more rivalries, more Alabama versus Georgia, more Texas versus Oklahoma, more LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Florida, Auburn, Texas A&M, and everybody else, being forced to line up and play real football every single week. And as fans, man, we love it. As college football people, we want it. But here's the problem. Somebody's got to lose those games. And when the SEC starts stacking, heavyweight fights on top of heavyweight fights week after week after week, the question becomes simple. Is the College Football Playoff Committee actually going to reward SEC teams for surviving that kind of schedule, or are they going to punish them for having, 2 to 3 losses? Well, guys, this is the Hunker Down Podcast, the home of the Gridiron Standard, where we bring you the hottest takes on college football all year long, man. So if you love college football the way we do, come on, take this ride with us. Give us a follow. Hit subscribe. Man, it's appreciated. It means more than you know. But look, let's talk about the problem the SEC just created, because this isn't just a Georgia conversation. It's not just a Alabama conversation or just a Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, or Florida conversation. This is a full-blown SEC problem. But since we're hunkered down, let's start with Georgia. And guys, follow along with me. Let's look at Georgia's 26th schedule, okay? The Dogs, they open with Tennessee State and Western Kentucky. And after that, the real season starts. At Arkansas, Oklahoma comes to Athens, Vanderbilt comes to Athens, then Georgia goes to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama, then Auburn comes to Athens, then Georgia plays Florida in Atlanta, then the Dogs go on the road to Ole Miss, Missouri comes to Athens, then Georgia goes to South Carolina, and after all that, Georgia still has Georgia Tech. Now, I want you to really think about that. That's not a schedule. That's a weekly stress test. That's not a path. That's a freaking minefield. Arkansas on the road early in the season, Oklahoma coming into Athens, Alabama in Tuscaloosa, Auburn, which we all know is never just another game when Georgia plays Auburn. Florida this year, we got them in Atlanta. Ole Miss on the road, Missouri, South Carolina on the road, and then a rivalry game against Georgia Tech. Man, that's the kind of schedule where a really good football team can lose 2 games and still be one of the best teams in America. This is the kind of schedule where a championship caliber team can slip once on the road, get caught, once in a rivalry game, and suddenly everybody on television's asking, are they really a playoff team? And that's where the SEC has to be careful, because the conference wanted more respect. They wanted, more inventory. They wanted more big games. Basically, they wanted to separate themselves from everybody else. But guys, there's a dangerous side to doing that, because if Georgia goes 10-2 against this schedule, what does that mean? Okay, if Alabama goes 10-2 against an SEC schedule, what does that mean? If Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, or Oklahoma goes 10-2 while playing 9 SEC games, what does that mean? Are we going to treat that like a championship resume, or are people going to look at that record and say, well, they lost twice? Because that's where college football gets dangerous. Guys, we all know not every 10-2 is the same. Not every 9-3 is the same. And be honest with you, not every 11-1 is the same. There's a huge difference between going 11-1 while dodging the toughest teams in your league and going 10-2 while playing a grown man, SEC schedule every Saturday. That's why the 26th season could completely change how we talk about playoff teams. For years, college football fans, we were trained to think 1 loss, okay, is dangerous. 2 losses, man, that could kill your entire season. But in this new version of the SEC, 2 losses may not mean you failed. 2 losses may mean you survived. And that's the part people are not talking about enough. And we got to talk about it tonight. The new SEC schedule is going to create better games, yeah, but it's also going to create uglier records. You might have an SEC championship race where almost nobody is undefeated. You might have a playoff debate where the 3rd or 4th best team in the SEC has a better resume than a 1-loss team from another conference. And then the committee's going to have to answer the question, do we care more about records, or do we care more about who you played? Because if the answer is just records, then the SEC, man, they made a huge mistake. If the answer is resume, then the SEC may have just built the most valuable regular season in college football. And, for Georgia, this is where Gunner Stockton becomes one of the biggest stories in the country, because Georgia is going to have talent. Georgia's always going to have defense. Georgia's always going to have offensive linemen. Georgia's always going to have running backs. Georgia's always going to have NFL bodies all over that field. But when you play this kind of schedule, eventually your quarterback has to go win you a game. Not manage a game, not survive a game, win a game. Guys, listen, there's going to be a 3rd and 8 in Tuscaloosa. There's going to be a 4th quarter drive against Oklahoma. There's going to be a moment against Florida where the whole season feels like it's hanging in the air. There's going to be a road environment at Ole Miss where everything is loud, everything's uncomfortable, and Georgia needs its quarterback to settle the game down. That's why Gunner Stockton matters so much, because in the old SEC, maybe you could hide a quarterback for a few weeks, but in this SEC, you can't hide anybody. Not the quarterback, not the offensive coordinator, not the secondary, not the kicker, not the coaching staff. Everybody gets exposed. Every weakness gets tested. Every Saturday becomes a resume game. And honestly, that's what makes this thing so exciting. This is the kind of college football we say we want. We say we want the best playing the best. We say we are tired of cupcake schedules. We say we want games that matter. Well, guess what, guys? Here it is. The SEC is giving us exactly that. But now the question is whether the rest of the college football is ready to judge it honestly. Because if Georgia goes 10-2 against that schedule, I don't want to hear people acting like this is the same as everybody else's 10-2. If Alabama goes 10-2 through the SEC, that's not just 2 losses. That's survival. If LSU, Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, or anybody else makes it through this conference with 2 losses, that team deserves a real playoff conversation. Because the SEC is not just adding one more conference game, it's adding one more chance for chaos, one more chance for an upset, one more chance for a top 5 team to lose on the road, one more chance for the league to cannibalize itself. And that's the word right there, cannibalize. The SEC may have become so strong that it starts eating itself alive. And when playoff selection time comes, somebody's going to be sitting there with a 10-2 record, monster schedule, multiple ranked wins, and they're going to be compared to a team with a prettier record and a weaker path. That's going to be when we're going to find out what the committee really values. Do they want the best teams, or do they want the cleanest records? Because those are not always the same thing, and you and I both know that. Now, in 2026, the SEC may force that conversation like never before, but here's my question to you. If Georgia goes 10-2 against this schedule, should the Dogs be treated like a national championship contender? Or should 2 losses still mean 2 losses? Guys, drop it in the comments, because I'm telling you right now, the SEC just created its own playoff problem. And Georgia may be the perfect example of it, but with that, guys, I'm out of here. And without further ado, you know what it is, baby. Go Dogs.
So hunker down, boys. Let the 808